This is one of only 2 Falcon 9 boosters that are on public display in the world today, and I got the chance to see it up close and personal, as you can see. It's been to space twice, taking Dragon capsules to the ISS, as I said, on 2 different occasions. And I'm going to show you this booster in a lot more detail in a future video here in just a couple of days. But I also got the chance to meet Anna Fisher, one of the first female astronauts to go into space. As a matter of fact, she went into space when I was a teenager, and I'm 51 now. And what she had to say was riveting, at least as far as I was concerned. So sit back and get ready for a unique experience on the Angry Astronaut right now.
With that, let's go ahead and get started. I like to start out with a picture of when I was a young child, particularly for the young folks that I speak to, so that they'll know that you don't suddenly just pop out as an astronaut, and there's many hard years of studying and so forth to be able to be in a position to even apply. And then I also like to talk about what I was like when I was very young. I was definitely a nerd. I loved science. I actually loved math. And I was incredibly shy. And if I had known that speaking in public was a requirement to be an astronaut, I think that would have frightened me much more than launching into space. But also, I like to be able to tell you about when I decided I wanted to become an astronaut, because at the time that I made that decision, women weren't even allowed to do those sorts of things. My father was in the military, and we were stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and we were out very early for a PE class, crowded around our teacher, listening to Alan Shepard, the first American to launch into space. And just standing there listening to him talk to mission control, at that moment I decided, if I ever get a chance, that's what I want to do. To combine my love with math and science, exploration, with getting to do something that I thought was very exciting and worthwhile. So, the seed was planted, but of course it didn't seem like a very realistic goal. Mercury astronauts were all men. They were all test pilots. Women weren't allowed to serve in the military and fly high-performance jets, so it certainly didn't seem realistic. But for the young folks in the audience, that's, when you have...
Okay, while I get my shit together, it's worth noting that Dr. Fisher not only became a medical doctor at UCLA, but also earned a master's degree in chemistry from UCLA as well. And by the way, she did all of this while having children at the same time. As a matter of fact, she had her first child 14 months before she took off on her shuttle mission in 1984. Just amazing. But let's get back to her, shall we?
Of course, by this time it looked like my chance of becoming an astronaut didn't seem too likely. There weren't a lot of astronauts around, and all of a sudden, but I did think in the back of my mind, well, maybe someday I'll get to be a doctor on a space, something like that. When all of a sudden, one of my friends in a chance lunchtime conversation, I found out that NASA was looking for astronauts for the new Space Shuttle program. This was 1977, and the shuttle didn't even fly until 1981. I looked at the requirements, and they were hiring not only pilot astronauts, but mission specialists, which are science astronauts. And I had all the requirements. It took, back then, without the internet, a good month. This is about a month before the deadline to get everything together, the application, transcripts, letters of recommendations, and all that, and got my application in a day before the deadline. 6 weeks later, I was in Houston interviewing right across the street where you're sitting right now. And then in 1978, January of 1978, found that I was in the first class, very lucky to be in the first class of astronauts ever selected for the Space Shuttle program. It was the largest class that NASA had ever selected, and as you can see looking at this picture, the most diverse. There were 35 of us, 15 pilots, 20 mission specialists, and for the first time, the first 6 women ever selected for the U.S. space program. Dr. Shannon Lucid on your left, she's a biochemist. Dr. Ray Seddon, a medical doctor like myself. Dr. Kathy Sullivan, the geologist. Dr. Judy Resnick, electrical engineer. Unfortunately, she died in the Challenger accident. Myself, and on the far right, Dr. Sally Ride, astrophysicist, the first American woman to fly in space, who unfortunately died in 2012 of pancreatic cancer. An artist near the Kennedy Space Center designed a patch about 1.5 years ago for the 6 of us, and I like to think that Judy and Sally would have approved of it, because I really liked it. 2 women flew prior to our group. Valentina Tereshkova was the first woman in the 1960s, shortly after Yuri Gagarin, the first human to leave our planet for the former Soviet Union. And then Svetlana Stavianskaya, I flew shortly before Sally's flight, and she was the first woman to do a spacewalk. And then we were the next 6 to fly. We're based here at the Johnson Space Center, right across the street. It's where all of our training takes place, certainly for the shuttle astronauts. For the International Space Station now, literally training is all over the world with all of our partners, and I'll talk a little bit about that later in my talk. The first year that you're selected as an astronaut, it's actually a little bit longer for the newer astronauts because they have to learn Russian, and I'll mention that a little later in my talk as well. And you're called an astronaut candidate, or an ASCAN, as NASA affectionately calls us. And then after that, you get different jobs in the office. My first job was to work on the spacesuit, in the area of spacesuits and spacewalks. And they didn't even have a shuttle spacesuit for us at that time. And we were trying to get a spacesuit small enough to fit someone like me. This was actually one of the Apollo astronauts, Pete Conrad's suit. He was the shortest of the astronauts, but as you can see, it's still pretty big. If you want to see the difference, this is like a one-piece suit, and I believe there's a Apollo suit on display over to your left, and the shuttle suit is over here on the right, a two-piece suit. Very different with a lot more mobility. So anyway, that was my first job when I started out. I had many other different jobs. I worked on the robotic arm. I worked in mission control as a CAPCOM, or the capsule communicator, the person who talks to the crew on orbit. And one of my jobs was to be the lead person at the Kennedy Space Center, where we have a group of astronauts that gets the shuttles ready to fly the testing of the payload and figure the cockpit for launch. And in fact, I was the lead for Sally's flight. And what you don't realize in this picture, 7.5 months pregnant as the lead Cape Crusader, as we call our group. I was about, when I returned to the launch of Sally's flight, I was called into the Director of Flight Crew Operations and asked to be assigned to a flight. So, of course, I said yes, and so I had a new baby, and I was training for a space flight. A very, very busy but very fun year. I delivered Kristen on a Friday, and the following Monday I was back at the office so that everybody knew for sure that I had no intentions of not fulfilling this dream that I had always wanted. One of the first things you do when you get assigned to a crew is you design your catch. And so our flight was a really exciting mission. We were going to deploy 2 satellites, But also, for the first time in history, we were going to bring satellites back, 2 satellites that were completely functional, but because of a failure of their rocket, they were in the wrong orbit and were totally useless. So you can see there's 2 satellites in the middle, symbolizing the 2 we would deploy and the 2 we would bring back. And there were 5 stars for the 5 crew members. And since I was the first mom to go in space and I was helping design our patch, I added a star for my daughter, Kristen. Training for flight is a little over a year. About 6 weeks before flight, you have a big press conference. And of course, again, because I was the first mom, they wanted to take pictures with Kristen. And so this was one of the pictures. One of our support folks made a little flight suit for Kristen, which I still have and gave to her. It doesn't fit so well anymore. Another picture that they checked on that time. After that, the last 6 weeks before going into space is incredibly busy. You almost have to have your scheduled time to go to the bathroom because it just gets very, very busy. This is a picture of just about 2 or 3 weeks before flight. You go to the Kennedy Space Center for a practice launch. And it's also the last time that you can actually, when the payload bay doors are open so you can see your payload. These are the 2 satellites that we are going to launch, but the one in the middle with the gold foil on the top is identical to the 2 that are on orbit that we're also going to go retrieve, to give you an idea of just how big they are. Here you see the crew. We're all getting ready to walk out on November 8, 1984, and in a later slide you'll see one of the current crews. So even now today we still stay at the same place before launch and walk out those same doors. This is what it looks like inside the cockpit. The commander on the upper left, pilot upper right, mission specialist 1, Joe Allen in my case, in the lower right, and mission specialist 2, which is me in the middle. I was the flight engineer. You can see from where I'm sitting, I get a good look at all the displays and so forth. We lifted off on November 8, 1984, as I said. Over 7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. You can see there's 3 main engines and then 2 solid rocket boosters. I have a very short video now, less than a minute, but what I'd like to do is try to tell you what it feels like to launch into space. And if you can imagine your chairs that you're sitting on and you lay them on their back, and you lay on the chair, your legs are up, you're sitting out on the pad for about 3.5 hours before liftoff. And now this is the last few seconds before liftoff, and I'm going to try to give you an idea of what it's like.
14, 13, 12, 11, 10. We're go for main engine start. 7, 6. We have main engine start. 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of Discovery and the first flight to retrieve and return satellites from space, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Roll program initiated. Houston now controlling. Roll program completed. Beginning throttle down in a 2-step fashion to 89%, then to 67% to pass through the period of maximum aerodynamic pressure. Throttle down to 67 confirmed. "45 seconds. Downrange distance 2 nautical miles. Altitude 3.9 nautical.
2 miles per hour to 17,500 miles per hour, which is orbital velocity, in about 8.5 minutes. Just to give you an idea of what you can do with 7 million pounds of thrust. I'm just going to quickly show you what it was like to live on board the shuttle, and although the shuttle isn't flying anymore, there's a lot of similarities to the International Space Station and some of the newer vehicles we're coming up with, which I'll show later in my talk. The shuttle is like a 2-story small apartment. The upper flight deck, as it's called, is very similar to a commercial jet cockpit, as you can see here. The aft portion of the flight deck, where you saw me sitting for launch, has the 2 seats there, and you no longer need seats when you're weightless, and they actually get in the way. So we fold those seats up, and then you can see on the left is a panel where the commander can fly the shuttle on orbit to dock with the International Space Station or to join up with the satellites as we're going to do. And on the right is the panel where I control the robotic arm. And then below is the mid-deck area, and that's where everything else takes place. I'm holding onto the handle of our treadmill. That suitcase-looking thing was our food warmer. We each had a locker, and everything's color-coded, red for commander, yellow for pilot. Green was my color, MS2, and you can see that's where we kept our clothing and our personal effects, and they allowed us to carry pictures and put up stickers from your university or your military affiliation. I started to feel like I was back in my old UCLA dorm room. Sleeping in space was really interesting. The first night when we got up there, I kept feeling like I wanted a pillow to put my head. It just felt so strange to just be sleeping with nothing, with your head not attached onto something. I created this little hammocky arrangement between 2 sleeping bags because some of my crewmates didn't want to use their sleeping bags. But about, this is the day before we went home, we were packing up and I was taking a little power nap, and you can see I'm really asleep here. I didn't know Joe took this picture until we got back and went through our photographs. You can see that there's a little tether holding me to the handle of that treadmill, and I'm fast asleep. It's very comfortable. A little bit about how to go to the bathroom in space. Everybody wants to know, but nobody wants to really ask. The waste management system, as it's called, is kind of like a porta potty that you would see at a festival or a race of some sort. And we use vacuum assist to help pull things along. And I think I'll leave the rest to your imagination. I was telling my partner that these last few days without water and so forth was very reminiscent to me of being in space, because everything takes a lot longer to do. And this is our pilot, Dave Walker. Hopefully he's just simulating here. NASA added a privacy curtain when we started flying mixed gender crews, but that's pretty much the only thing that was added. But as you can see with that privacy curtain, you really don't get a lot of privacy. You get to know your crewmates very well, and I always tell people, if you want to be an astronaut, you really have to be someone who doesn't value your privacy and so forth. You get to know your crewmates sometimes better than you really wanted to. So real briefly, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but what we did on our flight, as I said, it was a really exciting mission to be a part of. On flight day 2 and 3, we launched the 2 satellites that I showed in the previous slide. Day 4 was a preparation day where they were checking out their spacesuits, and Rick and I were getting ready to do the rendezvous to join up with the satellite. And then on days 5 and on day 7, very long 16-hour days, we did the rendezvous, which took about 6 hours, and then about a 6-hour spacewalk to retrieve the satellites. And here you see the tip of the arm that I'm operating, and Joe and Dale took turns flying over to the satellite and docking with the back end of the satellite, maneuvering the satellite over while I had Joe on the end of the arm. He said he felt like he was on the world's highest diving board looking 200 miles below as he was doing that. And then on the day after we finished the second spacewalk and had both satellites in the bay, they had made a for sale sign which they brought out, which was kind of a joke, but not really, because here were these very valuable satellites. And then we brought them back and they were refurbished and then later launched into space to serve out their useful lifetime. So the last day, the 8th day, is the day that you're getting ready to go home, packing up and taking your pictures, and got to speak with the president, who actually even asked me about my daughter Kristen, which was really nice. And then on the morning of the 9th day, you do the deorbit burn. And what that means is you slow down, you fire your rockets into the velocity vector, so you slow the shuttle down, and then basically you become a meteor, entering the Earth's atmosphere with temperatures of up to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit on the nose and the leading edge of the wings. This is a shot a friend of mine took as we went overhead Houston. And then we were the second shuttle to land at the Kennedy Space Center. And to go from Houston to Florida usually takes somewhere on the order of 4 hours. It took about 2 hours. It took about 4 minutes to go from Houston to landing at the Kennedy Space Center, again, just to give you an idea of how fast you're traveling. And as I said, we were the first shuttle or vehicle of any kind to bring hardware back from space other than the Apollo moon rocks. And we were by custom officials asking if we had anything to declare. I felt like about an 800-pound gorilla when we landed. It was amazing to me as a physician how quickly you adapt to weightlessness. And then when you come back, you of course have to readapt to 1G. We're all very unsteady. You can see we're holding very carefully onto the handrails so we don't fall. We then went to crew quarters, which is the place that you stay before you launch. Took a shower, and by about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we were landing at Ellington Field, which is just up the freeway here. And it was so great to be back with my daughter, who, that was like 2 weeks that we were separated with quarantine and the flight, so that was the longest time we'd ever been apart. I want to shift gears now and show you a little bit about the amazing view from space. It takes 90 minutes to go around the Earth at orbital velocity, and every 45 minutes you're seeing either a sunrise or a sunset. And no matter how many you see, you never get tired of them. They're so beautiful. And this is the Aurora Borealis, looking into the Mediterranean and the Straits of Gibraltar, looking at the Middle East and the Sinai Peninsula. And every astronaut, cosmonaut, or taikonaut, which is what the Chinese call their astronauts, will tell you, once you get into space, you don't see borders. You don't see the differences in the countries, and you actually feel kind of remote from the Earth, and it sometimes makes our conflict seem, and I know I'm trivializing history here, seem somewhat petty. And you start to really look at the Earth as one planet, as opposed to all the different countries. And I think that feeling goes stronger the longer you're on orbit. This is the Himalayas. And the daytime views are just amazing, but the nighttime views are what I love the most. They're just spectacular. This is Greece, Tokyo and Tokyo Harbor, the Nile Delta, and Africa truly is the dark continent. The only lights you see at night are along the Nile, along the coast, South Africa, and maybe lightning and propagating across hundreds of miles, but that is it. As opposed to the United States, as you see here, lit up like a Christmas tree with the outline of Florida looking at the East Coast. This is Los Angeles, and I can almost pick out where my house is, where I grew up. This is Houston, the Johnson Space Center, where you're located right now, and then the Kennedy Space Center, with the 2 launch pads, the vertical assembly building, and the 15,000-foot runway. And again, it takes 8.5 minutes to go from the west coast of the United States to the east coast of the United States, just to give you some idea of how fast orbital velocity is. This is a picture I just like of Europe with the cities labeled so I don't have to remember each one, and then just a shot that I really love of Italy.
Ms. Fisher then went into her obligatory talk about Artemis and the SLS and all of that, but of course, being the angry astronaut, when it came time for questions, I could not keep my big mouth shut. Ma'am, I was wondering if you'd be willing to comment, since you have so much experience with the Space Shuttle. The RS-25s and the solid rocket boosters did so well as being reusable, and now on the SLS they're going to be burning up. What are your feelings about that?
I really don't have a real strong comment about that. There's a lot of good and bad to reusability. Reusability was great just with the shuttle in general, but it also requires a lot of expenditure of funds and time and resources to refurbish them as well. So I'll leave that to other people to say what the right answer is on that. But that's a good question. I've never been asked that before. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you again, Dr. Fisher, for that very diplomatic answer and for everything else. Your intelligence, your ability to inspire other young women to become astronauts themselves, and for also the major sacrifices that you had to undertake to become an astronaut in the first place, as all astronauts, especially women, have to do in order to get into space. Thank you so much. And thank you, NASA, for allowing me and several other people in the audience to record this talk and also to share it with my subscribers. And thank you so much to my supporters for making this whole trip to Houston and shortly to Boca Chica possible. So until next time, stay angry about space.